Happy day to you, Scott Baker. New Year's Eve.
Yeah, I was going to say happy day. Is that the new way that we're saying happy New Year's? Yeah, New
Yeah.
Year's Eve today, December 31st. And welcome everybody to another edition of Lead Better. Love talking about admired leadership's field notes. And today's is, I think it's a good one here for the end of the year. It's kind of a statement in a question form. Why become an exceptional leader? That's the title of the field note. And so in a world of I was going to say exactly that, which is in a world where many of our field notes are about real sort of behavioral practices, this one has a behavioral implication, but it is asking the big question. Why should we care about this? And
Right.
well, if you're interested in that, then you're in the right place.
Yeah. And, the end of it actually is kind of challenging in the idea that if you're going to accept the obligations of leadership, then the why behind it is really understanding that the ego takes a back seat, right? Because most of great leadership means that you're not putting yourself in the center of it. You're just making things better, right? And that's a hard thing for people to wrap their minds around, especially if they've not sat in the leadership seat before, understand how difficult it is, or understand the real obligation is to make things, make people, make situations better. And so there's plenty to talk about here.
Yeah, and obviously it's at the heart and soul of what admired leadership is all about. And a lot of people have been reading field notes for many years, and it kind of got a sense of what we're all about. But some folks, might be watching now, and I know we're getting bigger audiences on Substack and on YouTube and TikTok even. And so you're like, what is this all about? And it's pretty simple, which is if there's a call to leadership, that call to leadership is not about you being up on a pedestal. It's about how you make other people better, how you make any situation that you're involved in better. And again, not by pushing your way to the front of the room with the Superman cape on. You might actually be the most invisible person in that process. That none of the credit might ostensibly come to you in that process, but in your heart, and probably the people that you were connected to in the process know as well, you made them better. You made the situation better. And then the ripple effect of that goes wider and wider. So the implications of that are really at the heart of our foundational principles and all the behaviors and all of the insights in our field notes.
Yeah. So the self-awareness that it takes to actually flex, to recognize the situation that you're in, and to recognize what it actually takes to make, okay, am I going to make the situation better here, or am I going to make the person who needs this leadership opportunity? So I'm going to loosen my grip. I'm going to let them have a leadership opportunity here. And sometimes there's a big flex. Like if we're at a crucial moment and I just need to kind of take the reins back away from someone who's struggling to kind of get their footing underneath them, and I'm going to go ahead and drive where normally I would kind of let you drive. Like there's a real decision that says here, what's the highest goal?
Right.
So for instance, when you're teaching your kid to drive, how willing are you to let them crash the car?
Yeah, right.
But that's exactly what's going on. If it's an initiative inside an office that says, how much money are you going to allow somebody to waste, right? If they're controlling an initiative in a way that's haphazard, right? They're just,
right.
But they need to go through it in order to really get their learning development done, right? So it's difficult to sometimes know what is the best thing here for a leader to make a situation better versus to make a person better. Right.
Yeah. And I think you have to have the longer range view, which is, well, we can win this play, but lose the game. Right. Yeah. I can kind of come in and force my way on what's happening at this moment, but maybe I jeopardize, maybe I alienate, maybe I discourage, maybe I actually get people to kind of quit the team because I didn't take the process of treating people as though they mattered.
Right.
And I think that's the thing, which is I think why be an exceptional leader? I mean, putting it real bluntly here is, are you looking around? I mean, we're in a situation where I think the world needs as many great leaders as we could possibly have. And so we can't just all around being like, I just wish there were better leaders around. Be like, well, if we're not willing to do the work, if we're not willing to get marginally better, bit by bit, day by day, to the point where we actually know we're closing the gap on our of where we are and where we could be. Our capacity grows. We make the capacity of those around us grow. Well, now we have the chance to tackle bigger and bigger problems, and we would welcome those problems, and we have teams that would welcome those problems. And then what happens is then, it just radiates out from a family to a community to to nation states. We can take it galactically, right? We don't have to get too highfalutin here, but you see that the proof of this is it's so much richer a way to talk about leadership, to have an idea of a leader making other people in situations better, rather than I'm the visionary leader, right? Which is how so much of leadership talk is. I'm like, man, no, you're not.
Yeah, exactly. And so, when it's a bunch of people in a room talking that way about leadership or about their experiences, it eventually becomes a little bit gross feeling, because it feels like the why there is status based, right? And so oftentimes the way that we end up flipping that on its head so it doesn't feel icky is we come up with like a principle-based leadership system, something like servant leadership. So we end up thinking that servant leadership is the answer to this question. And if we just think of everything that we're doing, we're the invisible ones, we're the ones at the bottom, we're the one. It doesn't actually leave you very satisfied, because servant leadership isn't the answer for everything. It really isn't. Because there are times where you actually have to step up and crack the whip in such a way where you don't look very much like a servant when you're stepping into command and control mode. Now, hopefully you'd never have to be in command and control mode, but every once in a while you'll find yourself in a circumstance where that's exactly what the situation warrants, right? So how does a servant leader who is principled and valued by the idea of always being a servant look when they've got a whip in their hand, right?
Right. Well, first of all, one of the things that is interesting about our sort of lens on leadership from a behavioral view, which is it's about what you actually do. And what I can't read your thoughts. Now, your thoughts, your motives, they all drive what you say and do. But those are the things that I know. I know what's coming out of your mouth. I know what I see in action. I know the consistency that I see. And so what we've said is that the behaviors and the insights that we try to bring from Admired Leadership in our field notes, in our AI, and our behavior platform, and our coaching, that we are sort of agnostic to the particular value set that you might bring. Now, I don't know that necessarily we would see all value sets as equal, right? If you're like, well, my value set is world domination, and I'm trying to create an AI that will allow everyone to bend their knees to me, or face utter devastation. Like, okay, like I don't know how far you're going to get in this process, but we've often said, you love a servant leadership lens. Admired Leadership is great for that, right? If you have a very aggressive, competitive sort of way to say, I sharpen I contend with my competitors. They get better and I get better. And we have a very aggressive approach to this that doesn't have a servant sort of leadership feel. The behaviors of Admired Leadership probably work for that. Yes. And I think that there is a health in saying that, one, defining your own sense of yourself as a leader. Like, what am I really after? And I don't think it should necessarily be something that you just happen to cook up on your own. Right. Ordinarily, over thousands of years, we as individuals don't often come up with the most brilliant insight that changes all of the history of how leadership is done. So in any field of business or arts or whatever, you look to the rich wisdom traditions and you try to situate yourself in something that empowers you, that informs you, that forms that sort of dense base of grounding underneath you. And then now we say, well, what are you going to do with that? Why become the exceptional leader? Why work so hard on the insights and behaviors that we put forward in Admired Leadership to say, when you become masterful at these things. That's the same. I mentioned yesterday, Twyla Tharp, talking on a podcast. When you watch somebody who's the master of ballet and dance, and you're saying, well, that's what the work looked like. Well, the work for her happened at 5 a.m. over 60 plus years, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours in the studio. So that at the moment when it mattered, she could perform with that excellence and have her dancers perform at that level that expanded the range of human possibility. Well, you as a leader, same thing. You can't not do the work, waltz into the office, and think that the way that you're going to engage in that process around feedback, or the way you're going to cultivate that relationship, the way that you're going to kind of decide, here's how I'm going to elevate the performance on the team. Here's how I'm going to get everybody to start thinking about time. That's not just going to happen.
Yeah.
And you can't wing it.
Yes. And so you might be stuck if you are only working on your ability to be more likable, because you feel like that's where you most greatly lack as a leader.
If I just were more charismatic, that would make it all different.
Right.
Maybe,
so,
maybe not.
but likability is very different than inspiration, right? Actually inspiring people to do a great job, like getting a high functioning team, shouldn't really matter whether or not you're liked or not, right?
Yeah,
there are people, and I'm one of them, who needs to be reminded of that all the time, because it feels like I operate from a likability standpoint more than anything. It's the way that I'm naturally wired, whether it has to do with my attachment style from when I was a kid or whatever. Likability is always there. So I'm actually checking likability and constantly saying likability is not the thing. Like I'm so natural for me to think about it that I should.
And most people don't spend that much time thinking about the very thing that you're thinking about, like to being the self-aware of your own predilection.
Right. And that's really what my biggest issue with this particular field note is, that it's an encouragement to people to think a little bit more about it. But if you don't have the awareness to be able to recognize not just the situational kind of things that we talked about earlier in our discussion, but the idea of what leadership is and how you should approach it, and how you should sometimes be the servant and be invisible, but sometimes actually meet the occasion and be willing to be the person in the middle of the limelight, even though you're not natural for that either, is quite a flex that some leaders can't make, right? And so you might be asking yourself, why should I ever step into the limelight? I'm trying to figure out how never to be in the limelight. There are times maybe in your leadership where that's the best spot for you to be, right? And that's an interesting question when it comes up for you, especially if you've used to just kind of being in the shadows and not eschewing any type of profile at all. It might be best for the situation that you actually step up. Wow.
Well, and the field note says that many of the best leaders weren't seeking it. They just all of a sudden found themselves in a moment where they had to step up.
If they were seeking it, it's probably a disqualifying thing.
It might have been, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as we're wrapping up, I want to just lean in a little bit on this idea, because I know some people will be like, yeah, servant leadership, that's great, or I like the competitive lens, and you can think of others. Well, we know, and we've talked a lot about leadership character and what are the components of leadership character and how you're ultimately getting to good judgment, and that's what we actually do expect from great leaders.
Right.
But the one thing that you see is that some of these things are not just get out of jail free cards. And here's what I mean by that. I remember even in my role as a journalist and thinking about how do you cover news stories that maybe are terrible about the people that you're covering and or have implications for that person and their family. And you could say, well, let's apply just whatever ethic. Okay? Well, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And you could say, well, if I'm walking along someone who's accused of murder, and I've got a microphone and I'm asking them, and this is from a real situation in my mind from 35 years ago, saying, did you kill those two young women? Why did you do it? And I pressed the question in the rain as I'm walking. Two women that were found not too far from where I live in Western Pennsylvania. Now, did his family like how I was treating him? So would I say, well, wait a minute, am I doing unto others? Well, no, I'm actually doing unto others as others should do unto me in a like circumstance, right? Yes. How would you be held accountable for the bad things, the awful things that you might have done? Well, the same thing. servant leadership is not a lens to just be like, take the soft path, right?
Right.
It may be that, but you'll notice that in some of the biggest illustrations of servant leadership, it's not the person saying, how can I really help you? How can I make your life better? It's actually, in some of the most famous points of this, the people being served hate it. They're like,
Yeah.
why are you doing that?
Right.
They're rejecting it. They don't want it, right? And the person that's in that role is actually actually pushing them through a very uncomfortable process to become better versions of themselves in a framework that is actually arduous for them to deal with.
Right.
And a lot of times we just say, well, that would just be nice if we were just being nice.
Yeah.
Right?
But it
That it's
oftentimes,
not just being nice.
it depends on your time frame, and it depends on like
Yes,
the
right,
scale
very
of-
much.
your definition of the scale of your community or your organization. We had a similar thing that you went through when we were running the newspaper here locally, me and a partner and I, about the decision of whether or not we would print names from the police report. Like the police report's publicly available, and we know anyone could get to it. But when we ran those things in the newspaper, we actually took the extra step of saying, if this person, if mom or dad, who's actually listed on the police report, has children in the schools locally, we're going to choose not to run the mom or dad's name, right? But that was only because our view of the community was just our
It
community.
was your particular kind of paper in that community.
Right. And so
Other-
our
but
value
you
would have
could
been
all-
we could have argued quite a bit, you
Yeah,
and I.
exactly
about
right. Yeah.
Me making a wrong decision versus your decision to actually intentionally out the person, right?
Yes,
Whereas I
right.
would intentionally keep it private.
Because you might say, you're actually, like, if you're saying, I'm just giving it when we're over time here, but if you were saying, I think it'll get to the point that we're trying to make, which is,
Yes.
you may say in all of truth telling, like that we want to maximize truth telling, we want to minimize harm. We
Yes.
want to remember that there are people involved and that there are human ends to those things, right? But that we're going to try to report the truth and tell it as fully as possible. And that if we hide any pieces of that, like if there's a lot of, say, drug dealing going on in a particular community, and if people are called out and it stops, then the lives of all the kids get better. But if it's kept in the shadows, or you don't really know, or there's no accountability, well, then everybody's lives get worse.
Yes.
Right?
And I want
So,
you,
yeah.
Scott, to be masterful at being able to make that decision in real time.
Yes,
Knowing
exactly
that
right.
you're evaluating all of those things and are quickly coming to a decision based. It might feel flippant in the moment to other people who don't realize all the things that you've gone through. And that's what leadership actually looks like, right? Is that you're not like setting out a principle that is always going to make those decisions for you. You're not going to come up with a rule that says this is what we're always going to do in every single one of those cases. That you're able to kick out the rule and make the best choice based upon that. Now, if you didn't practice that, if you didn't,
Right.
if you didn't have the behaviors behind you where you actually, if you didn't take time to think it through every single time, then I wouldn't trust that you're making those decisions well. It's the exact same thing. This is leadership at its
Yeah,
core.
right.
Your
Exactly right.
decision as a journalist to actually press or not press is leadership, right? So of
Yeah.
course you want to get better at that, right?
Yeah,
in
for
every
sure.
walk of life and everything that we're doing, practice it. And so in your New Year's resolutions, join us as we continue
Exactly. Yeah.
to practice this on an ongoing basis.
Well, and the field note ends by saying we all know the consequences of bad leadership and that leaders can do great damage. So don't be that person.
Right. Precisely. Okay. Well, I look forward to saying Happy New Year to you tomorrow. We'll talk.
Dynamite.